Welcome to today's presentation. We're going to cover several different things. We'll look at the forms of the important verb ich war. We'll look at progressive constructions, and we will look at constructions using zu. So the main past tense form of the verb sei, quest, which means to be, is ich war. Now you can use the past participle and say ich bin gewest, or grest, as a lot of people pronounce it with an R sound. That's definitely a form, and it has a slightly different nuance than ich war, but let's not get into the details too much, and let's look at the much more common form, which is ich war, I was. Ich war, I was. Du warst, you were. Du warst. War, sie war, es war. War, we were. Dir wart, you were. Sie war, they were. So this is the most common way of saying I was, or you were someplace, or you were sick, or whatever the case may be. It's very common, and you should learn the forms. Now, another thing we're going to look at here is progressive aspect, or progressives. Now, the progressive aspect in English is when you tack on an ing to a verb. So, for example, I am going to the store. Now, for the most part, Deutsch will just use the present tense or even the past tense if you're talking about the past time for these progressives. So in Deutsch, the best way to translate progressives is usually just the regular present or the regular past tense. But there is a way to emphasize progressive. Progressive means the action is going on right now. So there is a way to emphasize that in Deutsch. It's probably more common in Amish and Mennonite speech than it is in other dialects of Pennsylvania Dutch. And the way you emphasize the progressive aspect, an action that's going on right then, is you use a form of the verb to be, right? That's sei gewest, or the present tense would be ich bin, du bist. The past tense we just learned, ich war, du warst. And then you combine it with this little verbal particle am, its own separate word. And this kind of creates a modal verb, or at the very least, it creates a construction that similar to the modal verbs. In other words, it's going to take an infinitive. An infinitive, as we know, goes to the end. Let's look at some examples. Ich bin am Kuchen backen. That means I am baking a cake. Ich bin am Kuchen backen. I am baking a cake. Now, you could also in Dutch say, like I said, just use the present tense, ich backen Kuchen. And that would also mean I am baking a cake. But this construction here with ich bin, the verb to be, and it kind of emphasizes that you're doing it right now. Ich bin am Kuchen backen. I am baking a cake right now, this very second. That's what I'm doing. Ich bin am Kuchen backen. So if somebody were to ask you, what are you doing? You could certainly answer, ich backen Kuchen. I am baking a cake. If you want to do it, emphasize that you're doing it right now, ich bin am Kuchen backen. Let's look at another example, this one in the past tense. Sie war am Geilreiten. She was riding horses. Sie war am Geilreiten. So once again, we see the form of the verb to be, in this case the past tense. Then we have that little particle am. And then we've got our kind of infinitive construction that we're used to seeing from modal verbs. We've got the object, geil, horses, and we have the infinitive at the end, ride, to ride. So you would translate that as she was riding horses. If you tried to translate each word very literally, it would be like she was at the horses riding, which doesn't make much sense in English, but it makes sense in Pennsylvania Dutch. Now, not to get too far into the nitty-gritty, but the here, some dialects, they pronounce that as an, A-N, as if we're written A-N. And the position of it can change sometimes you'll see the right before the infinitive. So in a sentence like this, it could be Sie war geil am Ride, and that would mean the exact same thing. It depends a bit on speaker and dialect where the gets placed. In these slides, I'm putting the right after the verb to be because I think that makes the construction, the kind of modal construction of object and infinitive, a lot more clear. Sie war geil Ride. So you add the after the form of the verb to be, and then you throw in your infinitive construction that we're used to seeing from modal verbs. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say modal verb, then you want to go and take a look at that lesson. Okay, final construction I want to cover in this lesson is constructions using zu. Zu means to, English to, zu. And in these constructions, zu is basically placed before the infinitive. It's placed before the infinitive. And there are a couple places where this happens. We'll look at them. So certain verbs that act like modals take zu. Now, not every verb, it's just certain verbs. And the two, probably the two most common are anfangen, we've seen that before, it means to begin, and gleiche, gleiche, which means to like. Gleiche, gleiche. So these forms, so you could say I like horses. Ich gleich geil, just really straightforward and normal. But when you say, let's say, I like to ride horses, in other words, when you start adding infinitives, when you make them like a bit like modal verbs, then they use this zu construction. We'll look at a couple examples. Let's say the first example here is Ich gleich Kuchen zu essen. Ich gleich Kuchen zu essen. This means I like to eat cake. Now, notice that English does the same thing often, all the time. So, for example, you can say, I can bake cakes, in which case that infinitive in English, bake, doesn't have the to. But you can also say, I like to bake cakes. So English sometimes uses to and sometimes doesn't use to with its infinitives. It depends on the verb. So can doesn't use to, but like does. Same thing in Dutch. Some verbs like to use zu and others don't. Gleich is one of the verbs that likes to use zu. Afang is the other one. So here's an example. Fangt aus brood zu bakken. Fangt this brood zu bakken. That means he begins to bake the bread. Now, a lot of these constructions, you could get away without using the zu. Fangt aus brood bakken. That would be okay. It's better with the zu in there. So certain verbs, when they're acting like modals, remember, you're acting like a modal, the infinitive goes to the end. But certain verbs like to place zu before the infinitive. Two common ones, gleiche and anfangen. Now, another place where we use a similar construction is when we want to express purpose. And an easy way, in other words, why you're doing something. And an easy way to do this is to use the fa zu construction. Once again, the zu goes before the infinitive, and the thing before the zu is going to be the object of that infinitive, what that infinitive is controlling or doing. I've got an example for you here. Ich bin gekommen, Brot zu kaufen. That means I've come to buy bread. Kaufen means to buy. Brot is bread. Ich bin gekommen, Brot zu kaufen. I have come to buy bread. Notice in English we often translate these purpose clauses with simply with to. That's the equivalent of the Dutch zu. In Dutch you usually throw in a fa as well. Fa is the same thing as English for. So if you were to translate this very literally word for word, it would be I am come for bread to buy. And that's how you express purpose. For something to something. Va brood zu kaufen. To buy brood. Sorry, for bread to buy, i.e. to buy bread. Ich bin gekommen, Brot zu kaufen. Let's look at some vocabulary. Most of the vocabulary in this lesson involves eating and cooking. Time to get in the kitchen. Da Kuchen is the word for cake. Kucha, da Kucha, Kucha. Bread is es Brot. There's no common plural, just like in English, we don't usually say breads. I guess you could try, and just like we can make up the word breads, we can make up broda to be the plural, but there's no real plural. What we call in Pennsylvania red beets is die Rotrieb, that's one beet. Rotriebe would be the plural. Die Rotrieb, Rotriebe. In other parts of the country, I think they call these things purple beets. Die Rotrieb, die Rotriebe. Potato is die Grumbier, Grumbiere, die Grumbier, Grumbiere. And that word basically means ground pear, like the pear, your fruit, but one that's in the ground. Grumbier, Grumbiere. That's kind of a nice word for potato. Die Grumbier, Grumbiere. Now, pig stomach, if you're not from Pennsylvania, maybe you don't even know what pig stomach is. Pig stomach is, well, it's what it says it is. It's a pig stomach that's been cleaned out, and you stuff it with other food. Traditionally in Pennsylvania, you might use potatoes and sausage, both fresh sausage and smoked sausage. You might just stuff it with pork, and basically you stuff it with meat, potatoes, maybe some celery, other seasonings. You stuff it all in there, and then you cook it. You can boil it on the stove top first, and then finish it off in the oven. Some people cook it all in the oven. Pig stomach. It's a nice treat if you've never had it. And the Dutch for that is da saaimawr. Remember that G's between vowels are usually either almost silent. They're usually almost silent. Da saaimawr. And the plural, saaimawr, though very few people would eat plural pig stomachs. One is plenty for a family. Da saaimawr, saaimawr, pig stomach. To bake is bakken, gebakken, bakken, gebakken. To cook, kochen, gekocht, kochen, gekocht. To eat, essen, gessen, essen, gessen. And that's eat when like normal eating. If you're scarfing something down like an animal, there's a different word for that, and that's fresse. Fresse. That's to eat like an animal. F-R-E-S-S-E. Fresse. To eat hungrily. To like something is gleiche, gegliche. Gleiche, gegliche. And to buy is kaufen, kauft. Kaufen, kauft. Kaufen, kauft. All right, that's it for this lesson. I hope that you liked it. Ich hoffe, du hast es geglichen. Mach's gut.